Hello there, this is Instructor Paul, and in this lecture, we're going to be working in Active Directory sites and services. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to rename our primary site, then we're going to create a new site for our ITFDC02 subnet, and we're going to move the server into the new site, we're going to create a subnet, and we're going to create or rename our site link that we're using that is created by default. So I'm logged into ITFDC01 here, and you just need to be on any domain controller. It doesn't matter which one it is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select Tools in the top right-hand corner, and I'm going to select Active Directory Sites and Services. It's right above Active Directory Users and Computers. So let's open this, and it'll just take a second before it pops up. It's taking its good old time. There we go. Okay, so here we have sites listed at the top, and then we have enter site transports, we have subnets, and we have default first site name. This is what you see by default when you build a new domain using Active Directory Domain Services. Now this first enter site transports object here, this is actually our site links. This is how we connect our sites together. So we have IP and SMTP. Now, most of the time you're going to be using the IP links. I don't think I've ever seen a domain or an environment where they use SMTP. And the reason for that is that SMTP is only used when there's no physical line connecting your two networks. And this literally means you can replicate Active Directory sites and services with SMTP over email. And it's important that you realize that it's not replicating the actual domain controller sys volume and things like that. It's just replicating Active Directory sites and services. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to be working in this IP field. Okay, we can see here that we have our default IP site link that has been created for us. There is no SMTP link created by default. Under subnets, there will be nothing listed here. And under the default first name, if we expand this, we're going to have servers. And then under the servers, we have our domain controllers that are listed. So we have ITFDC01 and ITFDC02. Now remember, we created a different subnet and put ITFDC02 on that subnet. So we're pretending that our ITFDC02 server is in a different location. So first thing that I want to do is I want to rename this default first site name. And I want to give it a more descriptive name. So let's just pretend that this first site here is in New York. So we're just going to call this New York. Okay. And we can see here that it's giving me an error saying the site name cannot contain any of these following characters. These are all special characters. Basically, I put a space in the name. You're not allowed to have a space in the name. So you need to right click again, and I'm going to call it New York, all one word. Okay. I could call it new_York if I wanted to, but just one word is fine for me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new site. And the way that you can do that is just right click on sites and say new site. All right, so we have this little window that pops up. First, we need to come up with a name. Let's call this Virginia. And I've seen companies use airport codes for their site names, city and state. So you can just pick whatever you want. Now we have to choose a site link that we're going to add this site to. So we only have one option, and it's going to be default site link. So you notice we can't click OK without selecting the site link. And the transport, we can see here, it's IP, it's not SMTP. So we're going to click OK. Okay, so we get this little pop-up here saying that Site Virginia has been created. Ensure that, and then it gives us a list of different things that we need to do, like ensuring that it's linked. We need to add subnets and install one or more domain controllers in Virginia or move an existing DC into the site. Now I'm going to click OK. And if we expand this, we have servers, and of course servers is empty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to New York, and I'm going to either drag ITFDC01 or ITFDC02 into that folder, or I'm going to right click and I'm going to select move. I hear a lot of people that say that you should use the move instead of drag and drop, and I think it is generally a safer method because if you're just dragging this around, it could be easy to drop it into the wrong folder or things like that. So you can right click even in Active Directory, not just sites and services, but users and computers. You can right click on the object and choose move, and it's just a safer way to do it. So it's probably better to do it with this method. So I'm going to select Virginia and I'm going to click OK. So now that server is located in Virginia. So now what we need to do is we need to create a subnet that states that all the computers that are under this subnet go to this site. Okay, so we're going to do that right now. So let's right click on subnets. First, I'm left clicking on it. Then I'm going to right click and I'm going to say new subnet. All right, so now we're going to define the subnet for New York. So we're going to call it 192.168.0.0, and then we're going to say /24 because we're using the whole network. Now I'm going to say the site name is going to be New York, and I will click OK. All right, so now we need to create the subnet for Virginia. And we can do that the same thing. Just right click, choose new subnet. And this subnet is going to be 192.168.2.0/24. And I will select Virginia. Now I'm going to click OK. All right, so now we have our subnets configured. So any computer that joins the domain under this subnet will automatically be added to the Virginia site. And any computer that joins the domain with this subnet will be added to New York. Okay, and that includes the workstations. They'll know what resources to use for their local area. Okay, so this is pretty easy to set up. And the last thing we need to do, if we want, we can go under inter-site transports, and I'm going to select IP, and we have our default site link. Now, this is not very descriptive, so what we can do is we can right-click and choose rename. And I would like to name this something like New York to Virginia or something like that, but I'm not going to do that right now. If I double-click on this, we can see here that the sites that are in the link, we can see the cost, which again is the priority, and then we can see how often we are replicating, and we can do change schedule. So we could choose, specific times. Don't replicate at this, at this particular time, or replication available. So every 80 minutes, we could say, replicate every 15 minutes, whatever we like. But I just want to show you how to create a new site link just so that we do it. So I'm going to right click and choose delete, and I'm going to say yes. So right now we have no links in between our sites, so that's not a good thing. So we need to right click and say new link. And so we need to come up with a name. And by default, it's adding the two sites because there's no site link at all. We have to add these two. There's no option there. But if you had 10 or 15 sites and you already had your first site link, you would have a list of things that you could add in here on the left. And maybe I'll demonstrate that by just creating a test site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this New York. And then I'm going to say dash and then Virginia. Okay, so this is very obvious what sites are being connected with this site link. So now I can double click on this and we can do things like, the cost, everything that you've seen before, things you can do with Active Directory. You can delegate permissions, set up security. We can view the attributes of the object, which generally you will not need to do. So now let's just, as a quick demo, let's just right click on sites and create a new site. And let's just call this site LA just for the fun of it. And then I'm going to select New York, Virginia as the default link. And what we need to do now, since we don't have a server to actually drag in here, we need to go back to sites. I want to show you how to create multiple site links. So we're going to right click and choose new, and we're going to say site link. And let's say we had a connection that connected LA to Virginia. We could click OK, and we could say LA-Virginia. Okay, so we'll click OK. And so now we have a site link from New York to Virginia, and then we have this New York to Virginia, which contains all three. All right. So we could take out LA if we'd like, but if you remember that image that I showed you before, if we set a lower cost on this connection, then this connection could be preferred over the New York to Virginia link. Okay. So that's kind of the idea of site links. You just create these little proxy objects that say, these are how my sites are connected, and this is the connections that you should try to use if possible. All right, so since we don't have an actual LA office or anything like that, we don't have a site, we don't have domain controllers to put in there, I'm just going to delete all of that, okay? So click delete. We're going to say yes when we get the warning message. All right, so now we have New York, we have ITFDC01, and we have Virginia, ITFDC02. We've configured the subnets for each of these sites, and we've configured a site link. So that is how you use Active Directory sites and services. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I sure did enjoy making it for you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next lecture.